Hi, I'm Jamie Poisson.
Ismail Kone can win it for Canada. Kone! He sends Canada into the semi-finals of Copa America.
So that was a scene in Arlington, Texas, as Team Canada defeated Venezuela in the quarterfinals of the Copa America, one of the world's biggest soccer tournaments. If you didn't catch it, this was a game they won last week in this incredibly exciting penalty shootout. For many, this is the culmination of a decades-long project for the Canadian men's national soccer program, a project which has gone from relative obscurity to a legitimate force on the continent. Later today, Team Canada will play what is arguably its biggest game ever, as they prepare to take on the number one ranked international soccer team in the world and the current World Cup champions. A team led by a man that most would describe as the greatest soccer player to ever play the sport, that is Argentina, and of course, Lionel Messi. For more on Team Canada's unprecedented run at this year's Copa America tournament and the journey to this moment, I am joined by James Sharman. He is the host of the Footy Prime podcast, and he's been covering soccer in this country for years. Hey, James, thanks so much for coming on.
You are more than welcome. Yeah, looking forward to this.
It's great to have you. Let's start with the game that is going to be played later today. Canada versus Argentina, Canada versus Lionel Messi, right? In the semifinal of a major international tournament. And for those who may not follow the sport or this team super closely, just put that moment into context for me.
Yeah, for sure. So Copa America is, among the second best tournaments in world football. So you have the World Cup, which stands alone, of course. And then you have the Confederations tournaments. You have the Euros, also enjoying right now. That's Europe, of course, European Championship. And then Copa America, which is South America, obviously a hotbed of football, where the sport is more than just a sport, it's a religion. It's a massive tournament with incredible history. It's storied, it's fabled. It's a really special tournament and very difficult to win. So for Canada to get to the semifinals, a team, let's be honest, it's been through the mire for decades now, quite honestly. A sport that's fighting for its place in Canada. This is a monumental occasion. The result is, honestly, it's not even that important. Obviously, winning would be special, but this is a team they're playing who's the best team in the world. They likely won't win this game, but to get this far is really special, not just in soccer in this country, but as sport as a whole in this country.
The last time many listeners may have watched this team play was at the World Cup 2 years ago, right? Which was not a success.
The final whistle goes. Canada eliminated after 2 matches of their World Cup return. The country does.
What has happened between now and then?
Yeah, it's a good question because I don't know, quite honestly. Leading up to the World Cup, Canada enjoyed this renaissance of such. It played some wonderful football in the qualifying campaign. It made the World Cup first time in 36 years or whatever it was.
In your wildest dreams, from obscurity to unforgettable, this is the moment the country has waited for. The Kings of the North, they've done it. Canada is going to the World Cup.
And then had a very disappointing tournament where it didn't win, scored a goal. The first time that's happened in the World Cup for Canada.
Buchanan with the cross in towards Alphonso Davies! He missed the penalty in the opener. He makes amends today. Canada's history-making moment delivered by their biggest superstar.
But it wasn't a great tournament. And then something happened between that World Cup and where we're at now, where the team went into decline, some very lackadaisical performances. John Herdman, the much heralded head coach, he resigned, he walked away. Off the pitch, whole bunch of nonsense happening with the CBA not happening, pay equity being debated and negotiated. So off the pitch, it was ugly. There was a lawsuit against some former board members. It was all ugly, ugly, ugly. Meanwhile, the team was playing poorly on the pitch. So all they had to look forward to beyond 2026 in the World Cup was the potential to qualify for Copa America, which not every year will they even allow teams from this region, CONCACAF, North and Central America, into that tournament. But this year they did. So a qualifying campaign didn't go according to plan. Canada struggled. In the end, they just about qualified. It was tight. It wasn't pretty. And then they hired a new coach, Jesse Marsh, an American, which was a little bit controversial. He jumps aboard about 2 months ago now. His first game's against the Netherlands, which is one of the top teams in world football. And then France, which is arguably the best team in world football. Them or Argentina, a wonderful side in friendlies. That they lose to the Dutch heavily. They tie the French 0-0, and then they enter Copa America. And they played some really great football. And here we are now in the semifinal. So what happened? You know what? It's a reset of the mindset. I don't know entirely, but all I do know is that there's this momentum building in this country behind soccer, behind football, that I haven't seen for a long time. And it started with this team, and we'll continue with the women at the Olympics in a few weeks' time, and then onward to 2026.
Picking up on this idea that this kind of came as like a bit of a surprise for people in the quarterfinal, Canada beat Venezuela. You know, I was really interested in the descriptions of people in the stadium. Someone had mentioned that there were 50,000 people on hand, and about 49,000 of them were Venezuela supporters. Of the 170 media accredited for the game, only 10 of them were from Canada. And like, just how would you describe the environment that Canada's had to play in over the course of this tournament?
Yeah, not unexpected. You have to realize that this year's Copa America, that's usually played in South America at one nation per year type of thing. This year's been played in the States. Obviously, better infrastructure, and the North American teams were welcome as well. But yeah, I mean, listen, generally speaking, Canada doesn't play in front of a partisan Canadian crowd, only at home. And for many years, it wasn't even that. For many years, Canada would play against a Honduras or a Panama in Toronto or Vancouver, and there'd be mainly Honduran and Panamanian fans there, for example, right? So this time around, it's the same. Obviously, in the States, there's a huge Venezuelan community, huge Peruvian community, Chilean community. The Canadian fans that do travel, they're called the Voyagers. That's the fan group. They travel well, and they're passionate and great supporters, but there aren't that many of them. So maybe at most, if you got 1,000 Canadian fans at a match, you'd be happy about it. But the players seem to enjoy this. They enjoy this pressure, this intimidation of the crowd. Nowadays, you find that this team has so many players playing in big clubs, in huge leagues. They're not intimidated so much by the pressure of the crowd, right? In previous years, that would have been the case. So now you're playing in front of this massive, volatile, fervent fan base of your opponents. And the players, I think, are just using that as motivation. It's an amazing thing, but that is all part of playing for Canada. You're not going to play in front of 50,000 Canadian fans, outside of Canada.
Right. Another storyline here is that Canada's success has also been accompanied by kind of disaster, right? From both the United States and Mexico in particular, both of whom are amongst Canada's direct rivals. And watching some of the American broadcasts, they seem to have a hard time with this period of Canadian success, right? They're kind of having like a small meltdown.
What hurts the most is like this should have been the U.S. doing this, and now it's Canada.
And when you look at a team like Canada, who actually got out of their group, scoring one goal, it is a failure. We do not want to see Canada getting out of the group in a Copa America tournament.
Right. And just tell me a little bit more about what's happened and what you've made of their reaction to, how well this team is doing thus far.
It's wonderful. It really is. It just adds to it.
It is wonderful.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, as much as it's great to see Canada do so well this time around, to see the States and Mexico to a lesser degree do so poorly just adds to it. It's been wonderful. And the Fox coverage in the States, I mean, my word, listen, that they love clickbait. It's Fox. We understand that. But some of their comments, they cannot believe that the States aren't where Canada is. They can't believe Canada is where the States should be. They're incredulous.
Right. And I'm human, and I'm an American, and I'm coming off a devastating result when it comes to what the U.S. did in this tournament. And I got to see Canada. I got to see Canada do this. I mean, this hurts, man. This, Anybody but Canada, Mossy. Anybody but Canada.
And I think it adds to the rivalry, right? Every sporting nation needs a good rival. Canada's had the States, but for many, many years, the States are so far better than Canada. You know, it wasn't that much of one outside of the women's game. The women's game, it was 100%, but the men's game, not really. But in recent years, Canada's bossed them, you know, in some pretty big games. So to see this, it's still all very positive. Next year, there's what they call the Gold Cup. And that is the North and Central American region of soccer, right? So you have the Caribbean nations, you have the States, Mexico, Canada, etc. And traditionally speaking, the States win that tournament or Mexico. This time around, for the first time in some time, there's going to be a genuine chance Canada can win that. And it's going to add even more to this rivalry, I think. So it's a really good place to be for Canada. Let's nurture this hatred, sporting hatred. You know, that's fine on the sporting stratosphere. A little bit of hate's fine, I think. And I think that's going to add to the journey.
And it's just such a joy to see some of these Fox analysts in particular act like complete babies. It's been wonderful. You mentioned before that the team recently hired a new coach, Jesse Marsch, right? And he has introduced a new style of play, I understand. He's ushered in like this new generation of younger players. And so like, how would you describe his impact on the team? I know he didn't come in very long ago, but do you think he's really playing a role here?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's been an impact. Like I said, towards the end of John Herdman's reign and since then under the interim manager, who was Mauro Biella, a really good coach, a Canadian, who's actually on the bench as an assistant for Jesse Marsch, good football man. The team just didn't play very well, didn't really have an identity. But in comes Jesse Marsch, and in short order, being thrown very much into the deep end. For any new coach, playing against this quality of opponents probably isn't ideal. But as a nation, we've been just crying out for these kind of games, so no one's complaining about it. But he's learning on the job as well. Really learning about these players and meanwhile getting results, which is incredible.
You know, I came because I believed that I could help this team and that this team was a good fit for me. So I would like to say, yeah, that I believed we could get out of the group.
Not to get too, mired into the tactics and strategies, but generally speaking, Jesse Marsch is known for being a very aggressive manager.
They have to feel us, guys. They have to know we're here to compete. Not just that we're stylistically going to try to play the same way, but we came to play.
We took Venezuela to the limit, right? And it's a good team, and it's an athletic team. But our team speed and our athleticism, I think that's our goal, is to try to push teams to their limit and see if they can manage us.
He likes what they call the high press. He's got a great resume, great CV, coached in Europe, coached in the Premier League with Leeds, who was so much fun to watch. But we haven't quite seen that vanguard renegade type coach just yet. With the conditions in the States, it's been so hot, you can't really play that tempo all the time. And you mentioned there's a great point about the young players coming in. It is I wouldn't say a new look, because coming out of the World Cup cycle, the Atiba Hutchinsons of the world, Stephen Vittoria's, Milan Borjan's got a little bit old for this level of football. Atiba retired. Vittoria still playing, as is Milan Borjan, but he's gone to another more youthful feel to this side identity. And it's really working so far. Young players showcasing themselves. A lot of these players are already getting moves or being linked with big moves to big European teams. Moise Bombito, for example, Ismail Kone's already moved to Marseille during this tournament. He signed the deal, having gone from Watford in England. So you're seeing these guys showcase their ability under Jesse Marsch, and he's done a great job so far. Listen, we'll find out. There'll be adversity at some point. Of course, there will be. But as far as any expectations we had of this team under Jesse Marsch in this tournament, that they've blown those expectations away.
Talking about some of these young guys, there's this one guy from Nova Scotia, Jacob Schaffelberg, who people are calling the maritime Messi, which is kind of funny.
Yeah, it's funny. In football, we're not the most creative types, right? So if something rhymes or is an alliteration, we'll use it. Right, so Maritimes, Messi, 2 M's. Let's go with that, shall we? But listen,
that works.
That works, right? But the fact is, he's a young player. Was originally with Toronto FC.
In Toronto, I was a young player. I think I was always going to be looked at as a young player. So,
but as they've done in recent years, they made a mistake and they let him leave for Nashville in MLS, where he's done very well on a very average team.
He's shown up in the biggest moments, scoring twice against Lionel Messi and Inter Miami in the Champions Cup.
I would say it was one of my best goals of my career.
Here's Schaffelberg! Simply stunning!
And he gave me a wink, and that was kind of this moment where I was like, this is so cool.
Fittingly,
he has been this sensation of this tournament so far. Started on the bench. In fact, when Jesse Marsch first took over the job, his first squad, Schaffelberg wasn't in it. And he was asked about it. And he said, listen, Jacob will be part of the squads moving forward, but right now he's not quite there. Through injuries, etc., he got called up, and he's now won a starting spot in some of the biggest games in this team's recent history.
I can't really think right now, honestly. I'm still trying to catch my breath, but I'm just so happy for everyone.
He's so much fun to watch. Pure pace, pure aggression, dynamicism. He's brilliant. He'll be moving to a big club at some point for sure, although he's still very raw. But it's just fun to watch, you know. And this team, I tell you, this team is just likable. These players are fun to watch. The big names, the lesser known names, they're just really just, you know, doing what Jesse Marsch says and taking full advantage of their time in the limelight.
Yeah, I will say I'm not like a huge watcher of soccer, but they are very fun. That game against Venezuela was very fun to watch.
It was nonstop, right? The pace was nonstop,
Yeah,
and
it was great.
That style of football in this region, it's full of nonsense, right? The dark arts, physical, a little bit violent here and there. So it can be terrible to watch, or it can be just compelling viewing, and I think that's what it's been so far.
You talked earlier about how the men's team had been kind of mired for many years, which is very different from the women's team, who, of course, you know, got a gold medal at the Olympics in 2021.
Julia Grosso from Vancouver to win it for Canada! Canada came! Canada conquered! Canada gold at Tokyo 2020!
Why do you think that is? Like, what explains that historical gulf between the men and the women's game in this country kind of up until now?
Yeah, well, I think it's important to realize that the women have really, you know, flown the flag for Canadian soccer for a long time, but they've also been operating in a much smaller world. Up until recently, most nations didn't take women's soccer seriously. Some of the biggest footballing nations didn't, that's for sure. In recent years, that's changed. Thankfully, we're seeing the Englands of the world, the Italys, the Spains of the world, really taking it seriously. Not just the States or China or Germany, right? So the world's got a lot bigger in recent years, where the men has always been big. It's been a world with 215 or so federations worldwide. So Canada's been competing against the world essentially, and having a tiny budget to do it as well. Whereas the women have been in this smaller fishbowl, which is now getting bigger, and now they're being challenged. And you listen to Bev Priestman, the coach of the women's team, all the time saying, we have to sort ourselves out because before you know it, we'll be left behind. So I think it's changing somewhat in that regard, but that's been the main reason. You know, the men have been competing against a sport that has been cemented in the psyche of the world sport watching viewers for 100 years.
Let's talk a little bit about the game tonight. I know everybody thinks Argentina's going to win. Jesse Marsch, the coach, has talked about how he wants to rely on like the athleticism and the physicality of these players to like muddy up the game a bit rather than try to play a technical game against the best team in the world. But what kind of chances do you think Canada has against Argentina tonight? I know you mentioned this earlier, but it's possible, right?
Well, hey, listen, I've seen some pretty weird stuff happen in soccer, right, over the years. Anything's possible. It's highly unlikely they'll get a win out of this one. If they try and play football going toe to toe with Argentina, they'll lose. So Jesse Marsch is right. They've got to try and stymie that wonderful attack of Argentina. But what people need to realize is Argentina can play both ways. They can play beautiful, sublime, attractive football, yeah, but they can also get in the trenches, right, and get nasty. That's South American football. It's not just about the flair. It's also about getting dirty in the dirty areas. So they can play that way as well. They're well aware of it. The fact that Argentina played Canada already in this tournament and saw a little bit of that, they won't be taken by any kind of surprise. So they can adapt perhaps more so than Canada. But listen, Canada will sit back, I'm sure, to a certain degree. But when they get the ball, they're very quick in transition to attack. And they've got great pace where they can cause some issues for any team in the world. Can they convert those chances? That's been the problem so far in this tournament, that their finishing ability hasn't quite been where it can be. So listen, yes, Canada could win. If they do, it'll be one of the greatest shocks that we've seen in this country, or perhaps the world scene at this point in the tournament.
We can dream. There's still time to dream.
It's
a whole day, really.
It's a hope that kills you.
Yeah. Before we go, this tournament was always a party before the party, really, a kind of warm up for the 2026 World Cup, which is going to be held in Mexico, the United States, and here in Canada. So it's a moment people have been waiting for in this country for a long time. And, regardless of what happens tonight, where does this tournament leave this team now 2 years away from a World Cup on home soil? With the caveat that if they do win, it would obviously leave them in a better place.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Honestly, at this point, it doesn't matter the result. I think they've done the job at this tournament. The momentum's back. The hype is back. I've never seen buzz like it around Toronto, where I live. It's so important to start building towards the World Cup in 2026 with some real great momentum with this team. I think it'll be a successful World Cup regardless of Canada, because it's a World Cup and the traveling support will make it that. But I really believe that with Canada playing so well and giving hope to football in this country, it's going to only drive it forward. You throw in a great Olympics from the women as well. The whole, this journey towards becoming a soccer nation will take one giant step closer. And it's going to be so much easier to promote this men's team and these individual players, which they must do leading up to a World Cup with a successful team. So, they've done the job here. A good performance against Argentina, followed by next summer, a good performance at the Gold Cup. And watch out, we've almost arrived.
Okay. James, this was really fun. Thank you. And I'm looking forward even more to watching tonight. So thank you.
I've done my job then. Thank you so much.
All right. That is all for today. I'm JB Poisson. Thanks so much for listening. Talk to you tomorrow.